people aren't looking for you to come in externally as an order taker. They're looking for you to come in as a high-skilled freelancer. And so being able to be proactive, suggesting opportunities for improvements and so forth is really, really key to being a successful freelancer in Japan.
Japan has long been a popular destination for designers, and some UX professionals are considering moving to Japan. Many will likely start as a freelancer, which raises the question, should you consider becoming a freelance UX professional in Japan? To help us explore this topic, we have Erika Iwai with us today. She's the co-founder of Sollective, a platform that fosters long-term relationships between freelancers and businesses. Erika Iwai, welcome.
Hi Robert, thanks for having me today.
So let's start with the first question. Given that long-term stable employment still holds significant cultural weight in Japan, and freelancers have been stigmatized by companies, banks, lenders, housing agencies and society, is it possible to build a full-time career as a UX freelancer in Japan?
Yes, absolutely. I definitely agree with you that freelancers haven't been a main way of working or earning bread in Japan, so to speak. Definitely, long term employment has been the thing. However, things are shifting. With COVID, remote work started to take place, and that really opened the mindset for companies that, hey, maybe especially if you're working remote, there isn't really much difference between a freelancer and an employee because before COVID, people were coming on site every day. They were there for like 8 or more hours per day. And so between a freelancer who works remote versus a employee that was there on the ground, there was a huge significance. But now that Japanese companies are working more hybrid or remote, people have started to really consider freelancers as an option as well to build organization. The other thing is more and more people who can be out on their own, highly skilled freelancers, they are choosing to become independent, being able to control more of their life and career themselves. So absolutely, I think it is possible to build a full-time career as a UX freelancer in Japan.
Do you see certain industries, certain sectors, where you see much more demand for UX freelancers compared with other sectors or industries?
Yes, a company that offers cloud-based services, particularly SaaS, or it could be EC to consumers as well, they definitely have a lot more need for UX freelancers. I think that internally there isn't enough UX strategy as well as UX resource in terms of design as well. And so they are definitely typically looking always for a UX freelancer. But with the digitization, in Japan, it's called DX. It's short for digital transformation.
Mhm.
But many of the companies are trying to become a lot more streamlined in terms of the way that they work, being less human driven. And that's definitely created a need for UX freelancers more in traditional places as well. For example, manufacturing, as well as traditional, more of like makers, as well as automobile industries as well, given the fact that, maps as well as the UX experience within
Mhm.
cars is becoming significantly digitized. The other thing that I think is important as well is how proactive you are. People aren't looking for you to come in externally as an order taker. I mean, if people are looking to you to be just a doer and executor, then they would go to a temp agency. But they're looking for you to come in as a high skilled freelancer. And so being able to be proactive, suggesting opportunities for improvements and so forth is really, really key to being a successful freelancer in Japan.
I always hear that in Japan the maturity of UX is so low. Is that true, or are we now in 2025 at a level that it is equal to other countries?
I don't think that it's equal to other countries per se, because of the fact that there are definitely people who have um, studied and have become UX folks, but there's definitely people that have started their careers in more of a web design. And before web design, they started doing more of like a pamphlets for POP purposes and so forth. And so I do think that UX and the way that people are thinking about it is still not there. However, there are definitely great services, and people do understand that UX is not just digital, but there's also user experience in terms of physical experience as well. And so the folks that's really thinking more about this area, I think they're thinking a lot more holistically about it here in Japan, even though that may not be the majority of thought yet.
I want to dive into a little bit into the Japanese working environment. Japan's gender inequality in labor rights is well known. Progress has been gradual, but even so, does gender disparity extend to the UX freelancing market?
I think that just in general, there are way more men in the workforce than women to begin with. And this translates in every aspect of any function within Japan. So, already naturally, especially high skilled jobs, you are going to get a lot more men than women. It's very sad. It probably goes to education system as well as gender roles and households as well. But the of the women that has been able to break into UX, I don't think that it's a job where people face the gender gap so much because of the fact that it's a lot more technical and people see a lot more value in what you're saying or what you're bringing to the table. And I do think that gender plays less of a role in UX opportunities. You may see a lot more of difference where if you are a strategy consultant, for example, there's definitely a lot more men and it is a very male dominated workplace. But I don't think you're necessarily getting that in the UX. But then if you start to then go over to the more of the engineering side, then you will definitely get a lot more men.
Is there pushback against women, or is it just because what you just said, because there are not so many women?
Yeah, I think it just naturally goes into the fact that there's less women in the highly skilled workforce in any function. And I think this probably happens because of the cultural reasons, as well as women still are the primary caretakers of children in Japan, very different than Scandinavian countries, for example. And so once you step off the career ladder, it does become harder to get back into it, especially because in Scandinavian countries, men take paternity leave as well. And so, equally, people are taking time off
Yeah,
during maternity and paternity leaves, right?
yeah.
And so, it's not like men are a lot more further ahead because as a woman, you took maternity leave. They're still going to be taking paternity leave eventually as well. And so, there's definitely going to be a catch up that's required by both parties when you get back into the workforce. But here in Japan, because men still don't really take paternity leaves, it's just that women are falling behind and the men are getting ahead during the time when they've had to take maternity leave. And then the other thing that plays is there's definitely pay gaps as well. And so then it becomes, as the head of household, as a man, I'm earning more, so maybe the woman isn't earning as much. So then what happens is, well, you probably, man, should head the career further so that we can pay for the household when someone has to look after and pick up the kids. But with more supportive husbands, women are getting back into the household, and there is a lot more people looking to get help within the household as well, so that career driven women can still be part of the workforce.
Japanese government has taken steps to address labor shortages by raising the age ceiling. Ageism remains a significant challenge in many sectors, and not only in Japan. Does ageism, in your experience, play a role in the UX freelance sector?
This is something that we talk about quite a bit within our organization, not specific to a UX freelancer, but the talent field, whether it's an employee or a freelance, it doesn't really matter. But just in general, I do think that people are very sensitive to age here in Japan. And when I am sharing a profile with a client, one of the first things they'll say is like, how old is this person? Well, one, it's kind of illegal to ask that question in California, where I did HR as well. But it's one of the first questions that come up quite a bit here in Japan. And the sad thing is, it doesn't really matter whether you're young or old, because if you're irrelevant in terms of your skill sets, then it doesn't really matter about age, because there are people that isn't caught up with the current trends even if they are younger, or they may have like amazing skills but their communication sucks and they are an asshole. And so it would be nicer if it was less ageist in Japan, in terms of, I think people jump to conclusions that, oh, you are, in your 50s or 60s, and hence you may be this. And absolutely, people make generalization, and the general population, in terms of age, can be like that. But I do think that people should be open to more of a older or senior talent if it makes sense. For example, if you're making an app for more of the senior citizens, it absolutely makes sense that the UX person that's heading that can be empathetic, right? These aren't digital native people. And so, how do you make an experience way easier to follow when you haven't grown up with devices? I do think that if it is an app that is targeted at younger generation, probably maybe it does make sense that the UX person that's heading it can sympathize with that. And so I think it does really depend on the application as well as the services that you're trying to create and the target audience. But I do think that here it is definitely carte blanche, like, hey, this person seems old. They graduated during, X year. And so, no, I'm not even going to speak to them.
The tech industry in many countries is experiencing significant volatility, and while Japan remains relatively steady, how do you see the situation in Japan for the coming years? Because it's actually quite unique. I mean, lots of companies like Microsoft are laying off 9,000 people worldwide. For some reason, that doesn't happen in Japan yet.
Right. First, I think that the lack of tech talent was so big that people are still feeling like they need more technical people to begin with, anyway, and that AI hasn't been able to replace some of that areas. A lot of businesses actually still don't use AI. I forgot the data, but like someone was speaking about it the other day, couldn't believe how low the AI usage was in Japan still. So that already tells you that people aren't thinking that it's like replaceable right away, especially because I think people still appreciate the human elements
Hmm.
in a service, as well as they want things to be explained by a human as well. And so that's why I don't think, agents has taken off that quickly here yet. But the thing that I'm starting to see is I do have a network of engineering bootcamp owners in my personal network. And I think that whilst they were able to place these people right
Mhm.
away, now, because junior coders, it can really be replaced by AI. I think that has taken quite a bit of a hit.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of, I believe that the Microsoft layoff that you're talking about, it's not just juniors, but they're going to be probably be letting go of people in mid and senior layers as well. We're definitely not seeing that here in Japan. And if anything, there is a lack of resources in terms of mid and senior layers that I've had a client come to me a couple of months ago. They told me that this role had been open for 2 years. And that's one of the things that they just started to think, you know what, I can hire. Are we going to keep this role open forever? Or are we going to think maybe having a part timer freelance with the right capabilities is way better than zero?
We're at the end. Erika Iwai, thank you so much for your time. But before we end this podcast, what are the 3 books you recommend?
Oh my gosh. I really haven't read much books recently. I watch a lot of documentaries, and since we're, in the UX field, a film that I watched recently was pretty interesting. It's on Netflix. It's The Blackberry. I guess it's not a documentary, but it's based on somewhat real life. And it was about BlackBerry. But what was really interesting to me was they really took off, right? Like a rocket. And everyone wanted a BlackBerry. But then they became irrelevant after, iPhone, and they put the keyboard within the screen. And that's definitely a huge shift in terms of UX, right? Having a keyboard versus it's being part of the screen.
So that's one documentary, 2 left.
Yes. I watched one this week about American Apparel. That one was like pretty interesting in terms of when something takes off, there's all these like followers, right?
Yeah.
But then they realize that the leader was crazy, and then it like goes to shit. What's important is being able to look after your team members and caring about people. I mean, businesses at the end of the day are made up of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how much you can care about your team members, your employees, I think that's definitely a key learning. What else in terms of it's definitely not business related, but last weekend I watched 28 Years Later. It's a
Ooh.
zombie one where they have 28 days, 28 weeks, and now 28 years later. And that was kind of really interesting. Actually, there's some UX element to it, which is I think that UK got this zombie thing happening. However, the rest of the world kept on going and it wasn't affected. In many of the zombie movies or TV shows, right? Everywhere is affected by this like
Yeah.
zombie thing. However, in this context, it's only UK that's affected. And so it's really interesting how people in the UK became quite archaic
Mm.
because of the zombie infestation within the UK, but the rest of the world kept on going. And so they were like, oh, hey, you can order stuff on Amazon. And the people who had been in UK, they were like, oh, what's that? Or like, what's EC? Or just you can order on internet. And so it really was interesting in terms of depending on the way that society is, the needs really change. And hence, what people think is important or businesses or services, that really shifts given the context of everything.
Erika, thank you so much. Very much enjoyed our conversation. And for our podcast listeners, if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a message. And I wish you all the best in your journey. Erika, thank you so much.
Thank you.